Hi there, Lindsay here again. I wanted to continue on my homeschool prep series, and I wanted to show you how we plan out our full school year worth of lessons before we begin. Last year, I was overwhelmed with planning out my kindergartner's curriculum. It was a lot of working parts trying to fit all together, and I was afraid I was going to miss something. I was afraid I was going to overload us on one area and not on another. And I was just really struggling with how to put all the pieces together. So I went onto YouTube and I watched Christy Clover's crate method for how she divvied out the schoolwork for her kids. And I thought that was brilliant. You touch your workbooks once and then your child takes ownership. And I thought that is the perfect way for my Caitlin to go through and really take ownership of her education as well. I've seen a lot of moms use the workbox system, and I thought those were so cute. I thought they were just great, but I didn't want to have to touch things more than once. I wanted to not have to deal with putting work into a workbox every single night or once a week. It just seemed to be too much for me and to have things spread out too far. So I took Christy Clover's method and I used it for our homeschool system. And in order to divide all of our curriculum out, I went through and I also found another mom. Her name is Megan Phillips. She's got a YouTube channel here as well. She had created this little chart, this little spreadsheet for herself so that she could just go through and quickly lay out what she wanted to do each week for her curriculum. And it was just such a systematic way of going about it. And it's so simple, but my brain was just so cattywampus at the beginning of last school year that it was too hard for me to come up with something like this for myself. So she created a printable that you can access on her blog, and she has the date down this way, and she's got all the subject slots available up here. It's a printable, and you can print out a blank one and write on it yourself. I'm sure you could go in and actually edit it if you wanted to. Don't quote me on that. But so it was really simple. She put out the 36 weeks, so it only took up 3 sheets of paper, which made things very streamlined, and I appreciated that. And then she explained how she used it. So I went through and did a similar thing. I went through our curriculum and I started with math, and I sorted out how many lessons there were, and in our math section 2 this year there are 132 lessons, and I knew we wanted to do school 4 days per week, and I wanted to touch on math and language arts every single day. So I just filled in 4 lessons per week, so 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, and all the way down through to the end of the year. And then I did the exact same thing. Fortunately, with Writing with Ease, that one was already broken down for me in 36 weeks, so it was just week 1 through 36. For spelling workout, same thing, lessons 1 through 36. Super simple. The parts that were a little bit trickier for me were grammar, and we only had, I think, 100 lessons total, if I can remember correctly. Yes, 100 lessons, and so I decided to do grammar 3 days a week instead of 4. And so I just went through and 1 through 3, 4 through 6, etc., all the way down. And then when it came to science, each of our God's Design for Heaven and Earth books, each textbook comes with 35 lessons. So I decided to do science 3 days per week, and then on the last day of that particular, or the last week of that particular book, there are only 2 lessons, and usually the last lesson is just an overview and a final exam. But because there are 3 textbooks, doing 3 lessons per week, it was really simplified for me. So I had 3 12-week chunks. History was a lot more difficult for me. Using Story of the World, there are 42 chapters, and there are varying sections per each chapter. So instead of trying to double up on chapters per week, I decided to go in and divide it out based on sections. So I went in and I said, okay, so for the first week, we're going to do all of chapter 1 through section A of chapter 2. And I think that was either 2 or 3 times per week. I can't quite remember. But ultimately, we're doing history anywhere between 2 and 4 times per week, and I divided it out by sections. That does mean that my chapters are going to be kind of split apart, but because we like to listen to the Story of the World audio CDs in the car anytime we have to drive to town or go anywhere, it doesn't really impact the complete comprehension of what's being shared in the Story of the World. So I had this, and then I just needed to go rip up all of my workbooks. And that's exactly what I did. I took them to the print shop this year. Last year I used a steel ruler and a knife. This year I opted to just have the print shop do it, so it was a nice clean thing. I had the teacher's manual portions of those activity books and workbooks put into a spiral binding. And so now I'm left with things like this. This is the student section of Story of the World Volume 2. This is the student section of Writing with Ease Volume 2. And then I already had my Saxon Math Level 2 cut as well, and spelling workout as well. So I've already gone through and set those things in here. So I've got all of the math worksheets that Caitlin will need for week 1, her spelling lesson for week 1, and I've already got her science, anything that was worksheet, quiz, lab, or test. I've already put those into her workbook, into her weekly folder as well. The only things I have left to plug in are her writing and her history. Now she's going to be using wide-ruled notebook paper instead of these sheets. However, these sheets have the copywork on them, and instead of making more work for myself, I decided I would just go through and just stick each of these into her work folders. So what happens next? We've got all of this laid out, organized, set up for her. How do I just do the weekly work? So I went online to Megan Phillips's blog again. She created a checklist, a weekly checklist for her students, and it has it's an editable, customizable download. You've got your student's name up here. You've got your subjects listed down here. There's an area down here for your daily habits, and there's an area over here for personal growth where you can work on character development and really assess how your child is doing. And then she's also got a weekly overview. Caitlin loved having the weekly overview last year because it really kind of made her feel in charge of her own schedule. So each week I would tell Caitlin, okay, well, what week is it? Let's pretend it was week 7. I would have her come to her work crate, pull out week 7, and she would get her 5 folders. She would divvy out the worksheets and lessons that were in this hanging file herself. She would put math, writing and grammar, spelling, science, and history all separated out into these folders. So that way she could choose which subject she wanted to do easily in the mornings and not have as much to filter through. So she would go through, she would plug the worksheets into their appropriate folder, and then she and I would talk about how she wanted to divide out the work. Last year we used these checklists and it was a Monday through Friday layout. I asked her how she wanted to do it this year. She said she liked the 1, 2, 3, 4. So she would go through and she would write lesson 1, or whichever lesson we happen to be on. If it was week 1, she would go in and write lesson 1 for math, lesson 2, 3, 4, and whether there was a fact sheet applied with that or if there was a master. And then she would do the same thing with her grammar, her writing. So it was something that we did together for her to be able to see how to lay out her week so she wasn't overwhelmed at the beginning or falling behind at the end. We felt like that was a really valuable tool for her, and she just really appreciated taking ownership of her schoolwork. So she would do all of that, and I went through. In my lesson planner last year, I used the Happy Planner, and I really loved the layout, but I hated the disc binding. It just drove me banana sandwich. So I did splurge this year and buy an Erin Condren teacher planner, and I have my shortcomings and reservations about this particular planner. However, it is spiral bound, and it is the format that I really like. So we have to go in for quarterly checks with our charter, and one thing they want to see is a lesson plan book. So I go through and I write the title of each lesson on here, or just a rough idea of what each lesson is about, just to prepare myself. I know it seems redundant because you could just look in the table of contents or look to the next set of lessons, but for me, my brain really needs to see it laid out in writing that I have hand penned into it, just to solidify that. This year, the only workbooks that we are not taking apart for this crate system is her handwriting book and her Spanish Song School Spanish book. We're going to keep these together for right now and decide if we want to take them apart later or not. Last year, the handwriting, it felt like it was not something that could easily be taken apart, and she really just liked going through and doing 2 pages per day. It made it simple for her. She didn't have to, we didn't wind up with units split apart, even though that's exactly what we're doing with history. So, but anyway, keeping the handwriting book wasn't too much for her to have as an actual workbook in the crate. Let's see, was there anything else? I think that about covers it. So that is how I plan out my entire school year before we start, and simplify my life and give Caitlin a lot of ownership over her education. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.